Okay, so first thing that I want you guys to do today, I've got two questions for you on the board. I just want you guys to just stop and think about them for just a second. First off, I don't want anybody blurting these out, but just think about it. First off, what is presidential impeachment? And the second question, when is impeachment warranted? Okay, so take a few minutes. You can discuss those two questions amongst yourselves. My two government students that are in my class should know what that is by now. If you don't, I haven't done my job. But for everybody else, so y'all just bear with me. But for everybody else, just you can talk, think about them, discuss them for just a little bit. What's up, Ryan?
Hey, here's my charger.
No. Can't. Wait, where's your charger anyways?
All right.
I don't, it's broken, dude.
Okay, so just I want you just to stop, think for just a second. You can discuss it amongst each other. We'll start this again in 5 minutes. I'll just use my timer real quick. Smile, you're on camera.
You want to give it back?
All right, hey.
Oh my gosh, get out!
Ryan.
Brian, or
Go.
Paul, you need
Bye.
to delete that right now.
Oh, yeah.
That is so bad.
All right. So let's take 5 minutes
Not on your freaking Instagram story, get out.
and
You're shaking.
let's take 5 minutes and just consider these questions, and we'll get back and talk about them.
So bad, I don't
I don't think I want to. I'm so tired. I was drinking. I'm driving. I'm tripping off that
I
power.
might just crop that part out.
Yeah, please do.
It's after you submit
I was drinking.
Listen, the guy we're doing this is a teacher, so he's
Oh, God.
yeah, he's teaching.
That's about the last time we tried it.
I use mine for ChatGPT.
All right, let's keep conversation of what we're talking about. Keep conversation on point.
People are saying it was an abomination to Obama's nation. Wow, God forbid a man say. Tough girl. You don't like the verse about drinking and driving?
Yes.
Yes.
The recording can hear you.
What?
The recording can hear you.
What is the
warranted mean, like put into place?
When is it like okay to impeach a president?
Yeah, I can hear you.
That's so popular.
Yes. Yes.
Red boy.
Yeah, like I said, you guys should know what this is by now, but
It's impeaching a president.
what does that mean? What does it mean to impeach? What does that word mean?
Wait.
You're gonna have to crop that
Impeachment is a process by which a legislative body or.
Hey, don't look it up. You're supposed to be able to figure out, think about it yourself.
That's when you,
Don't just
you get
find
rid of
the
the
answer.
president.
No.
It is, so we're gonna
And
go
then
on
when
it.
is impeachment wanted?
When should it be done? This is a question. This is a
If
question.
they killed someone, we can't have that as a president.
Okay, alright, that's the line.
Or like,
I'm not
if you're
sure.
doing drugs, I guess you, there's definitely just nothing on drugs, but like.
But what about medications?
I'm talking about like meditation. What's drugs? I can't even. Yeah, stuff like that, not like, I would say weed's like, that, what's bad, but like,
What about
Same.
the same thing?
They don't have sex
Sam,
on
what about CBD oil?
Crap out.
What about asking about CBD oil?
okay, I don't think CBD is good either. We probably shouldn't be using that either. We probably definitely shouldn't.
Are you looking for the original song that made it all that popular?
Huh?
Yeah.
It's not called Six.
Oh, it's not
It's not what?
I just looked up right
It's not what?
Right now.
Yeah, I know that.
Good,
It
good.
used to be good for you. Like,
What
what
is
we
it?
said.
I mean, when you think about it, it's literally like a fake version of like. concentrated, like.
It's gonna be like 30 years from now. Like, if you use CBD oil, we're gonna take you in for some treatment or something like that.
Facing is already.
Well, we already
Well, we know that.
For
Terrible.
months.
Yeah.
That scares me. That's why I can't do that.
That's why all these teenagers are in the hospital.
I know, there's the whole
It takes like 10 minutes.
Are y'all on topic?
Yeah.
Doesn't sound like it.
like Emma. Like you can't recover. Like one thing.
Alright, 30 more seconds.
It's worse than you. I mean, the rest is terrible.
Shut the light on. Alright.
Are we good? Everybody?
Are you putting Fortnite?
Who is TCS Music?
Okay, so, can somebody tell me what impeachment is?
It's like,
What is impeachment?
Getting rid of a president.
Getting rid of a president. Do we just, like, what do you mean by getting rid of?
it's like processing of like.
They're not no longer the president.
They're no longer the president?
Charge.
Do we charge them? Which one is it? Getting rid of or charging? Those are two different
Charging,
things.
it could be
Charge.
either, it's like
Okay.
federal impeachment is like where you charge somebody against it,
Okay,
like for like doing something wrong.
okay. So, impeachment, officially under the Constitution, impeachment just means removal from office. Okay? So, when we impeach a president, we are charging him with something to remove him from office. Now, there have been a number of presidents that have been impeached, which means charged with something that warrants, yes, Nixon was getting ready to be. Andrew Johnson is getting ready, that's why we're talking about him. Trump was impeached, Clinton was impeached, and I'm missing
So
somebody.
everyone was impeached, basically.
No, it was actually, it's not very common, actually. It has become more common more often.
When was Bill Clinton president?
Bill Clinton was president back in the 90s.
I forgot about him.
Um,
You think that's kind of creeps?
I know.
He was
is
impeached for
pretty
the
bad.
Monica Lewinsky.
Huh?
Yeah, he like cheated on.
So,
Hillary.
So,
Because they felt like
impeachment just means that you're being charged as president with something
That's true.
that can take you out of the office. You can leave the office. Impeachment does not mean you are being charged as a criminal. Once you are impeached and removed from office, you can be charged as a criminal, but that has never happened. We have never removed somebody from office for impeachment. And so that's what impeachment is, removal from office. It does not indicate that you've actually been charged with a crime, although afterwards you can be. So when is impeachment warranted? When should we impeach somebody?
When there's a serious abuse of power, violation of public trust.
Okay, violation of public trust.
Official poses an ongoing threat to the integrity of the office or rule of law. I don't really know what that means.
Okay,
Other means of accountability are enacted.
Okay.
Basically, like if there is just like a serious allegation against you that's like has been like proven to be true, or like just like stuff that like a president should be like.
okay, so you're right. Article 2, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution says that a president can be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. So yes, you are, according to the Constitution, presidents can be impeached for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Well, treason's pretty obvious, right? We know what treason is. Aiding or suppressing, aiding or preventing the U.S. from being able to do something that it needs to do, right? Bribery is pretty straightforward, but what?
Is treason like going? Can that be also like classified as going against like the Constitution or no? Is that not
Yes.
what that is?
Yes. People have been charged for treason for not following constitutional law. Or, actively aiding and abetting the enemy of the United States. That's kind of the most common definition for treason. But, what is this other high crimes and misdemeanors stuff? Is that vague?
Wait, can you like simplify that? I'm sorry.
That's what the Constitution says. Treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors.
She's bad.
So what does that mean? What is a high, what would you consider a high crime?
A high crime.
Yeah, what is a
Killing
high
someone.
crime?
Domestic violence.
Killing
murder,
somebody, domestic violence, murder,
Sexual assault.
sexual assault, okay, yeah,
Theft.
theft,
Tax fraud.
tax fraud,
These are all
okay,
in
alright.
there.
So, yeah, but is that specific? Is high crimes, is that specific, or do you think it's open to interpretation?
It's open to interpretation.
Yes, there lies the issue with impeachment. This is why presidents have been impeached. Some of them have been cases that they are probably more legitimate than others. Okay? Now today, we are going to primarily be discussing the impeachment of Andrew Johnson,
Okay, 'cause I'm like.
which is one of those cases, even though Andrew Johnson was an unpopular president, he's constantly been ranked as one of the worst presidents in American history. He was impeached on shaky grounds. And we're going to talk about that today, primarily. But before we get into that a little bit, I need to get a little bit of background through. All right, so we left off discussing the state election results. So in the elections of 1865 and 66, Republicans won by a complete landslide. And a lot of these Republicans that are winning in Congress and in local elections are radical Republicans. So this is the first time in American history that African Americans are making it into positions where they're actually governing. And so you have guys like Hiram Rebels of Louisiana, I think that's where he's from, and Congressman Robert Smalls of South Carolina are entering the halls of Congress, and they're starting to actually make policy. This is one of those victories of Reconstruction that we can celebrate. That we have more people are becoming involved in government, which is a good thing. Yes. For briefly, yeah. We need to turn it back on in just a minute. All right. So
See on the phone, so.
there is an issue though, and that is the issue of a supermajority. When supermajorities are able to get into office, it could be either a Republican supermajority where most of Congress is Republican or most of Congress is Democrat. Either way, that can prevent other officials, sometimes on opposite party lines, to not be able to do their job effectively. All right, and this is the case this is what happened in this. Because of this Republican supermajority, this wave of Republican leaders, the Democrats really don't have much power. Now, even though Andrew Johnson is officially a Democrat, or officially a Republican, he leans more towards the very moderate Democratic tendencies, and so a lot of what he's trying to do is pretty loose, right? So Congress is doing their best to try and force the states to accept a bunch of conditions to come back into the United States. Johnson is actively vetoing every attempt, but Congress can overturn a presidential veto, so that's what they do. This effectively means that Johnson does not have any means of control over the government at all. He's kind of been eliminated from the whole process. So the Republicans have a supermajority, more of a supermajority than they had the previous year after the elections of 1866. On March 2nd, 1867, Congress passes its Reconstruction Acts. There's two of them. The first Reconstruction Act split the South into 5 military districts and placed all of those military districts under martial law. And here's that map showing you what they all look like. And for the record, North Carolina is District 2. So that's the first thing that Reconstruction Acts do. There is no civilian law, there is only martial law in these places in the South. We're more of occupied territories than actual states. To reestablish statehood, according to Congress, the state had to provide loyalty, which was that oath of office, and I think the higher percentage, which was the Wade-Davis bill, They also had to accept ratification of a proposed 14th Amendment, and they had to give African American males the right to vote. You had to do that in order to be readmitted. Now, some states did do this pretty early on. I think Tennessee was the first state to be readmitted to the Union. North Carolina was pretty early on. I can't remember exactly when. But African Americans in these states had a ton of authority. Because all of a sudden, I mean, overnight, there are literally millions of people living in these states who were enslaved. And now that they're freed and given the right to vote, they become the political majority overnight. So there's a ton of authority that African Americans have in the voting process. And the states are doing whatever they can to stop this in some situations. We have things like literacy tests. All right? Has anyone ever seen a modern ballot?
Yeah.
Yep. Do you need the right to vote? Do you need to be able to read in order to?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. There are, you can vote by party lines if you recognize the R and the D, or because you just check the name beside the R and the D even if you can't read the name. But reading now is something that a lot of people can do. So we put names beside the ballot instead of maybe pictures. Now, but back then, there was you could make your mark, and they had two different ballots, two different boxes that you put your vote into, and one was the Democrat box and one was the Republican box. You did not necessarily need to be able to read to vote. But a lot of southern states insisted on establishing literacy tests. That you have to be able to read in order to be able to vote. Not necessarily the case in the 1860s. Also, they had poll taxes. Government, we talked about this today. Everybody else, what is a poll tax?
Mr. Fish is right there. Right there. That's the rock one thing there.
Alright. What is a poll tax?
Like we're gonna pay to vote.
Oh, yes. No worries. Macy. Thank you. Yeah, you have to be able to pay to be able to vote. Now, states had the leeway to be able to do this. Some states, southern states, could charge African Americans a higher tax rate than white people if they wanted to slow that down. Some states did. Now, poll tax becomes abolished in one of the later amendments to the Constitution. So now voting is free. Back then, they could charge a poll tax for it. And violence. The KKK, the Ku Klux Klan, is now a thing. And there's other groups like the White League, the Red Shirts. These are all the groups that start off as, just like social clubs. And then they start working as vigilantes, and over time they become essentially terrorist organizations. And they use political terror as a tool to stop people from voting. So the Second Reconstruction Act, passed in March, provided more detail than the first act. Its provisions included three main things. First one, it placed military commissioners in charge of voter registration and elections. Since the states tried to slow people down from voting, the military stepped in, and they were the ones who had the ability to register voters. Because there were in a lot of cases states that just didn't register African Americans. Second, in order to become a state, you had to register all eligible males to actually be readmitted as a state in the Union. Third, it required eligible elections before any new constitutions were elected. So you had to do all of these things. You had to register everybody. Everybody had to vote. And they had to have a new state legislature in place, approved by the government, to make a constitution to then be readmitted. Is everybody following along where I'm going on this? Yes. So there's a lot of states who, under the presidential Reconstruction, they became states almost instantly. Great. But then this bill passed, and they are not allowed to be states anymore. They have to jump through a whole different set of hoops. So this is creating a lot of confusion, and this is part of the reason why Reconstruction ultimately is a failure, because they keep moving the goal line. Now, Johnson is suffering through this. He's the president, but he essentially has no power because he tries to veto the Reconstruction Acts. The Reconstruction Acts don't get overruled, so Johnson does what else he can do. See, Johnson, as president, was in charge of the federal bureaucracy, and he's still the commander-in-chief of the military. He still has power outside of lawmaking power and the power to approve law. Because the president's job is to execute law. Well, Johnson does not want to execute this law. So what he does is he starts firing bureaucrats. He starts firing the people whose jobs it is to actually execute the Reconstruction Acts. And he's replacing them with people that are loyal to him. So Congress in March of 1867 passes something called the Tenure of Office Act. Now this basically was an act that called for all military orders from the president to subordinate officers to be approved by General Grant first. General Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, the hero of the Civil War, had to approve all orders going from the president to subordinate officers. And it also ensured that any bureaucrats fired by Johnson had to stay in office until the Senate approved replacements. This was later deemed unconstitutional. You might care to guess why? Why would the Tenure of Office Act be unconstitutional?
That goes against
Goes against George Washington?
I mean, it does, yeah.
It goes against the presidency. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
How?
Because that's like longer than 4 years.
No, it doesn't have anything to do with
Or I
the
meant, like,
terms.
Oh.
What powers does the president have?
Does the president have a lot?
He does. He has a few. He's the commander-in-chief of all armed forces. By forcing all orders from the commander-in-chief to go to a lieutenant general, a subordinate first, is that taking away the power of the president as commander-in-chief?
No.
No?
In a way.
In a way, yeah, that in a way is what makes it shaky. Yeah, because what it's saying is this can be abused. They're taking presidential power away. And the president has the ability to hire and fire anybody he wants. Now, there's a decorum for this, but he can, legally, he has the ability to hire and fire anybody he wants. So they're taking away presidential appointment power as well. This actually strips presidential powers given to him by the Constitution away, which is why it was later deemed unconstitutional. So in sum, basically this act forces the congressional supervision over President Johnson for his role as head of state and commander-in-chief. Johnson is getting certain powers taken away from him. Now, I've actually got a little quote from the Tenure of Office Act that I want you guys to read. It's a little bit out of order from what the lesson plan called for, but the Tenure of Office, here's an excerpt from the Tenure of Office Act. Everybody just take a minute, read through that as a group. So what is this saying?
It's like,
Demand.
It's what?
A demand.
It's a demand. Yeah, I mean, Congress, this is a radical Congress pushing against the president who's a little bit more
yeah,
middle ground.
and like, it's saying, so like, last little part. What is contrary?
Conferring, it means
No, contrary.
contrary, like otherwise.
Oh,
Except as here and otherwise provided.
so like, any of that thing, that like list right there, that's not within the bounds of this, like, whatever they're trying to say.
Yeah,
High misdemeanors.
yeah, it shall be entitled to hold such offense until successors shall have been in like manner appointed and duly qualified, except as here and otherwise provided that the Secretaries of State, the Treasury of War of the Navy and of the Interior, Postmaster General and Attorney General shall hold their offices respectively for and during the term of the President, who may have been appointed, and for 1 month thereafter, subject to approval and with the advice and consent of the Senate. So all these people have to keep their jobs for the entire duration that the president is in office plus a month. Or the term is in office plus a month, right? So, remember, Andrew Johnson is Lincoln's vice president. He is finishing out Lincoln's term.
Well, yes.
Yeah. So that means that under this law, Johnson cannot fire the Secretary of State, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of War, Secretary of the Navy, the Interior, Postmaster General, and the Attorney General. He can't fire any of those people. It also says, be it further enacted that every removal, appointment, or employment made, had, or exercised contrary to the provisions of this act shall be deemed and are hereby declared to be high misdemeanors. AKA, if you violate this act, we will impeach you. Alright? And that's exactly what happens. Alright?
Yeah.
This is exactly what happens. So, back to this particular case. Alright. So that's the Tenure of Office Act. Now, what happened? So, as in August of 1868, Johnson tries to remove Edwin Stanton, this guy right here, who is Lincoln's Secretary of War. Remember, Johnson is finishing out Lincoln's term. So, this guy was appointed by Lincoln under the Tenure of Office Act. He has to remain the Secretary of War for the remainder of Lincoln's time in office. That includes Johnson's presidency. Now, Johnson knew what he was doing. So when he decided to fire Edwin Stanton, he did it when Congress was in recess. That means they're away from DC. This prevented Johnson from facing immediate impeachment proceedings. He had time to prepare a defense, basically. Now, the reason why Stanton was fired is that Stanton was a radical Republican. He had supported the policies of Congress. He had supported the Wade Davis bill. He was a supporter of the Reconstruction Acts, and he did what he was asked to do by Congress and Senate without an issue. In his place, Johnson tried to appoint General Grant. The idea behind that was that Grant was very popular at the time in the Union, and that Grant, hopefully his popularity would kind of stop people from wanting to impeach Johnson. Grant, though, refused. He did not want to get caught in the middle of this. So Johnson instead was forced to appoint this guy, General Lorenzo Thomas. So how many of you have heard of Ulysses S. Grant? Everybody, right? How many people have heard of Lorenzo Thomas? Not as popular, one person. Not as popular, right? Popular general. He was a popular general at the time, but not as popular as General Grant. He also had some political enemies in DC. Now, when Congress reconvened that December, they refused to accept Stanton's removal. So they forced Stanton back into office. On February, and they kind of did this as a way to catch Johnson, and he did it. So on February 21st, 1868, Johnson fires Stanton anyway. And in May, Johnson became the first U.S. president to be impeached. So, before we get into that, I do have a bit. I have an activity that I want you guys to work through. There's a reading involved, and then there's some questions on the back. So I'm going to pass this around, and I want you guys to kind of work through this. You can work through this in teams, groups, if you so desire. So this is all about the impeachment of Andrew Johnson. Oops.
Guess what I got from the chemistry test? 67. I just don't read it. I don't know.
So, is this like a rhetorical thing, or is this like something you want us to write on the paper?
Write it down on paper.
Critical thinking questions.
Can I please type them? I don't feel like getting this paper out.
I can get you more paper.
Please give me paper.
I can get you paper. I will happily provide paper.
Okay.
Okay. We still answering questions.
Yeah, they're on the
Just
back.
use the same like page that I had and
We
then
never
you just
turned
like
it in.
customize it how you want.
The paper, not that.
There's a peace deal. Mr. Hollis, you remember the peace deal and
Yes,
Palestine?
I did.
Yes, and all the little Democrats were worried about like who's gonna make it worse, and he didn't.
Credit where credit's due.
Usual. Wait,
That's
isn't
a
that
big
good?
deal. That's good. That's a good thing.
Because like, isn't like
Peace in the
basically
Middle East is a
ending
good
the war
thing.
that everyone thought that was gonna like keep going. Oh, that's good.
Credit where
For
credit's
all the
due.
children and the people.
Right, 'cause there's, as of a week ago, there was a genocide going on.
Edit it any way you want.
I don't know, I just
You
thought
could
it like
delete
popped
everything
up.
on it.
Trump's been accused of historical
No.
peace. I don't know, it just like popped us in there and then I'm sure Mr. Hollis heard that. Thank you.
Yep.
Wait, Mason, hold on.
Although the news made me sad because one of those shootings on Saturday night was actually in my hometown.
Oh, yeah, I remember you telling us about that.
Yeah.
That's terrible.
It is
It's
terrible.
holiday season.
Do you have people that live there? that would do it?
I used to drive past that bar all the time. I never have been there, but
Really?
really.
That's not out here, it's just the weekends.
I've got paper. I've got.
Save it for the weekends.
Yeah, we got paper.
Everybody got paper?
Yeah, I just leave it.
Alright, cool. So I'll give you guys some time to work through that, read through it, answer the questions on the back.
I thought it was kinda like one. Mine's like more like.
So what was the main difference between President Johnson's approach to Reconstruction and the Republicans' approach to Reconstruction? Why did President Johnson remove Secretary of War Edwin Stanton from office? What was the 10-year Office Act? And then we'll talk about Johnson's impeachment trial in a little bit in class, but there is a kind of a brief summary of what's going on in the trial. Did Johnson's impeachment trial prove the effectiveness of the impeachment process and a way to preserve separation of powers between executive and legislative branches? Why or why not? Again. All right. So, question one. What was the main difference between President Johnson's approach to restoration and the Republicans' approach to restoration? What was the main difference between President Johnson's approach to restoration and the radical Republicans?
Republicans like actually they're like more stricter and like enforce the plan.
Yeah.
But like Johnson, he like favored other people.
He
Okay.
wanted to like have free reign on like what he wanted to do.
Yeah.
I feel like.
Yeah. And remember at the beginning we talked about how he had his, it was kind of a hit my way or the highway kind of guy, which is not very good for negotiation, especially as the president. Number two, why did President Johnson remove Secretary of War Edwin Stanton from office? Why did he remove Edwin Stanton from office?
He strongly opposed Johnson's lenient approach toward the South.
Yes, he was. So Edwin Stanton was a radical Republican. He directly opposed Johnson's very lenient position in the South. Number 3, we already discussed this, but what was the Tenure of Office Act?
By dismissing Stanton without the consent of the Senate, right?
Yeah.
President's duty to faithfully execute a law.
Yeah. So president's job is to enforce the law.
We like it
Con-
where you're going.
Congress argued. It is going now. Congress argued that Johnson had violated his job as president. Question 4. Did Johnson's impeachment trial prove the effectiveness of the impeachment process as a way to preserve separation of power between the executive and legislative branch?
Yeah.
Yeah, why?
Didn't get that far the time I reached.
Okay. Alright. So, they prove the effectiveness of the impeachment process as a way to protect separation of powers. So did it preserve the separation of powers in the end? And that's in the results thing. The core of the trial was about Tenure of Office Act, and the issues were much broader. So let's see. Johnson's accusers argued that not only had he violated the Tenure of Office Act, he also represented the return of slave power to the United States. Johnson's defenders accused Republicans of using impeachment as a political tool. 35 senators voted to convict Johnson and 19 voted to acquit. This was 1 vote short of the 2/3 majority, so Johnson was not actually removed from office. President Johnson served the remaining 10 months of his term as president. He continued to veto bills that he saw as unconstitutional, but enforced the laws when passed. Congress continued to override the vetoes. When Johnson died of a stroke on July 31st, 1875, he was buried as he had requested, wrapped in the U.S. flag with his head resting on a copy of the U.S. Constitution.
Okay.
He's very patriotic.
The Tenure of Office Act was largely repealed in 1887, and its principles were declared unconstitutional by Supreme Court in 1926. Like I said, it was later declared unconstitutional. So, let's pause that question. So hold that thought. We'll talk about the trial. We'll go over some of the details, and then we can ask that question again. So, bear with me for just a second. On February 24th, 1868, Andrew Johnson was impeached on 11 accounts related to violating the Tenure of Office Act. 9 of the 11 articles were directly related to Johnson dismissing Stanton and appointing Lorenzo Thomas. The other 2 were related to denying the authority of Congress. So they charged him for basically violating a congressional law. All of these charges were shaky. Okay? All of these charges could be argued down to interpretation. And they were based on a potentially unconstitutional law. Later was determined to be unconstitutional. So the case against Johnson, in sum, is shaky. In addition, since the position of vice president was still vacant, the next guy in line was President Pro Tempore of the Senate. Yes, sir. Yeah. Benjamin Wade. Now, Benjamin Wade was the same guy who had written the Wade-Davis bill. So this guy is a radical. Do you think the moderates in D.C. would have liked Benjamin Wade being the president of the United States? Probably not, right? He's not very moderate. He's very much a radical. So the moderates, who probably did want to see Johnson leave, probably didn't vote for impeachment because the alternative was worse in their mind. Yes, ma'am. So here's a short video. Like I said, this is compared to the Trump impeachment. This video was actually done kind of around the same time as Trump's first impeachment trial. Here's a short video on the outcome of this trial.
Hi, I'm Griffin Johnson, the armchair historian. Today's video is a short and unorthodox one for the channel, all about Andrew Johnson, the first American president to be impeached. We recently experienced only the third impeachment in the entire country's history, so it seems like an opportune time to go back and take a look at the first time this has happened. Andrew Johnson, the 17th President of the United States, was formally impeached by the House of Representatives on February 24, 1868, and faced trial over the next 3 months. The entire event was the greatest political spectacle of the early Reconstruction era, as the country struggled to recover from its brutal Civil War and overcome the bitter divisions that precipitated it. The concept of impeachment in the United States finds its origin in the British legal process, whereby all public officials, including ministers of the Crown, were held accountable for misconduct. The monarch, however, could not be impeached, since the U.S. didn't exactly begin its existence by quietly disagreeing with King George III. It shouldn't be a surprise to you that the American impeachment process is a bit more inclusive. There are a lot of other videos on YouTube that'll explain this process in more detail, but for our purposes today, you just have to know that in order for a president to be impeached and removed from office, he must formally be accused by a simple majority in the House of Representatives, then, all the way on the other side of the Capitol building, convicted by a 2/3 majority in the Senate. When the House begins the formal process, it votes on articles, which are specific allegations of impeachable conduct. So what constitutes an impeachable act? Well, that's not super clear. The phrase high crimes and misdemeanors is so uselessly vague that it usually just means whatever Congress thinks is bad enough. In President Johnson's case, his particular high crime / misdemeanor was the culmination of years of animosity with the very party that had put him in office. Without a 20-minute digression into 19th century party politics, here's the short version. The Democratic and Republican parties, as they existed in the 1860s, bore almost no resemblance to the ones that are active today. And if you're about to jump to a conclusion based on your modern-day preferences, it's probably wrong. The longer version, which will still be way oversimplified, is this. At the time of the Civil War, the Democratic Party broadly supported slavery and represented land-holding white planters in the South, while the Republican Party represented the interests of city-dwelling Northerners who tended to be abolitionists. Southern Democrats, who were worried that the election of Abraham Lincoln would lead to the eventual abolition of slavery, spearheaded the secession movement that began in late 1860. However, not every Southern slaveholding state left the Union to join the Confederacy. In fact, 5 so-called border states remained part of the Union and retained their democratic governments. To shore up electoral support in these states, Lincoln selected Democrat Andrew Johnson from Tennessee, the only senator from a Confederate state to remain loyal to the Union, as his running mate in 1864. Even though he was elected as vice president on the Republican ticket, the more radical elements of the Republican Party were suspicious of him from the very beginning. Some of these men had been fighting slavery for decades and doubted even Abraham Lincoln's commitment to protecting the rights of newly freedmen at the end of the Civil War, or holding the Confederate leaders accountable for treason. When an assassin's bullet elevated the Tennessean to the presidency, they expected even less. Even so, the radical Republicans counted a number of cabinet secretaries among their political allies, notably Secretary of War Edwin Stanton. He had served Lincoln as the civilian head of military affairs throughout the Civil War and supported a much harsher vision of Reconstruction than either president. Considering that much of the South was now divided into military occupation districts administered by the War Department, Stanton essentially governed half the country. The combative secretary, now perhaps the second most powerful man in the country, was low-hanging fruit for a new president trying to consolidate his authority and protect his fellow Southerners from punitive measures. Seeing this, the radical Republicans in Congress executed a political maneuver that may actually have been intended to trigger impeachment proceedings, passing the Tenure of Office Act on March 2nd, 1867. It required the president to seek Senate approval to fire appointed officials, and it passed despite Johnson's veto. In a turn of events that surprised absolutely nobody, Johnson eventually sought to test the law and wrest control of Reconstruction back from Congress. In August of 1867, without consulting Congress as the act required, he suspended and replaced Edward Stanton. Brendan Wineapple, author of The Impeachers, The Trial of Andrew Johnson and The Dream of a Just Nation, suggests that the defiant president was self-sabotaging by nature. She writes, "The man had a penchant for martyrdom. It allowed him to cling to the belief that he was cruelly beset, deeply unappreciated, wholly persecuted, and denied the respect he rightfully deserved. His temperament allowed no other choice. He thus welcomed a struggle to the death, with the hero himself going down to defeat in a blaze of unforgettable glory." It is equally unsurprising that his enemies immediately reacted to his move. Now that Johnson had openly challenged the Tenure of Office Act, the House reinstated Stanton in January 1868 and moved forward with impeachment. Enraged by the audacity of the House, Johnson fired Stanton once again and replaced him with Major General Lorenzo Thomas, a longtime foe of Stanton. Not to be outdone, Stanton had Thomas arrested for illegally seizing his office. On February 24th, the House voted 124 to 17 to impeach Johnson and establish a committee to draft the articles of impeachment. The 11 articles mostly stemmed from the dismissal of Stanton and the subsequent illegal use of War Department funds and personnel. The next week was spent approving rules of procedure for the trial, which convened on March 5th with Salmon P. Chase, the Chief of Justice of the Supreme Court, presiding. The process stretched on for 2 months, during which the radical Republicans worked to convince their colleagues that Andrew Johnson had not only violated the Tenure of Office Act, but also conspired to keep the planter aristocracy in power over the new freedmen of the South. Johnson's defense team argued that the law didn't even apply in this case. The U.S. Senate's official history recounts their argument that since Stanton had been appointed by Lincoln, Johnson was not obligated to continue his service. Even if the senators accepted the act as constitutional, the defense team insisted, Johnson could not be impeached for a mistaken interpretation of the law. Furthermore, they claimed that Johnson's intent was to test the constitutionality of the act before the Supreme Court, which he had the right to do. The president's defense team was a 19th century legal dream team, featuring Attorney General Henry Stanberry, who had resigned his position to work on the case, and former Supreme Court Justice Benjamin Curtis. At the advice of his counsel, the bombastic president did not appear, relying in part on the prestige of his advocates. Ironically, another asset for the president was the very man positioned to replace him. Since the vice presidency was still vacant, Benjamin Wade, the president pro tempore of the Senate, was next in line of succession. One of the most outspoken radicals, he advocated for such harsh Reconstruction terms that he angered the party's moderate wing. The possibility that Wade might be president if Johnson was removed may have been a powerful incentive for certain Republican senators to vote for acquittal. As we mentioned earlier, impeachment is a political process, not a legal one, and though Johnson may have violated the law as it was intended, removing him was a difficult proposition. It would have been yet another destabilizing event for a nation that had barely managed to cling together. Benjamin Wade would have been the third president to take office within 3 years, and the second one for whom nobody had cast a single ballot. Senator James Grimes, a Republican of Iowa, perhaps summed up the opinion of many moderates when he said, "I cannot agree to destroy the harmonious working of the Constitution for the sake of getting rid of an unacceptable president." On May 16, 1868, after 2 months of arguments and weeks of deliberation, the Senate voted 35 to 19 to convict Johnson on the first charge, 1 vote short of the 2/3 necessary to remove Johnson from office. On May 26th, the Senate voted to impeach Johnson on Articles 2 and 3, but once again, the vote tallies were the same. That same day, the trial was officially adjourned, and Johnson remained president. In hindsight, it is possible that removing the president over such a politically polarized issue would have set a dangerous precedent in an already fragile union. It is also difficult to dispute that Johnson's lenient version of Reconstruction gave rise to new white-dominated Southern governments that enacted Jim Crow laws throughout the former Confederacy. America's first presidential impeachment is one of many events in the country's history that must be examined with nuance to understand its ramifications today.
All right, so make a long story short, it's a politically charged issue, which leads to Johnson being left in office. A lot of people thought he was not a good president. In fact, he's frequently ranked as one of the worst presidents in American history. But the way that this impeachment was handled left a lot of people with a bad taste in their mouth, which is why he was able to hang on to the presidency. He didn't get reelected. In fact, after Johnson successfully petitioned, Grant was nominated. So Johnson won the impeachment case, but he lost the last of his support through this. And before we get into the next nomination, I got one more thing that I want you guys to do. This is all the senatorial statements, not all of them, but a sampling of the senatorial statements that were the result of the Johnson impeachment trial. So what I want you to do is read through these, restate the main point of their argument in your own words, check if they were either for conviction or against conviction, and then rate from 1 to 5 to what degree does this quotation raise political issues? And the second thing, to what degree does the quotation raise constitutional issues? So remember, this is not a legal proceeding, this is a political proceeding. That was an important point that he made there. So as you read through these statements, this should take you maybe 5 or 10 minutes. As you read through these statements, I want you to figure out, is this a constitutional issue? Is this a political issue? What exactly is the reasoning behind this? So I'll pass this around and you guys can work through that too. I'll turn the lights on so you can see better. And then we'll talk about the